Hey, what's up? Silas here. I'm going to be reading you some interaction that I had shortly after, it was the day after the 2020 presidential election, after I posted something on my Facebook wall. So this is going to be about politics. Might trigger some people, some of the topics we're going to be talking about. This is adult content. I think most of the things that I'm doing on this channel are adult things. And I think problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. And there's still, at the time of me actually recording this, which is November 29th of 2020, still unsure who will actually be sworn in as President of the United States of America come January 2020. From the information that I have now, it seems I would prefer it being Donald J. Trump, but I don't think it's the end of the world or anything. What people define America, the end of America, if Joe Biden gets in, that depends on how he gets in and the process that it goes through. But let's just get into this now. So on the screen, if you're watching the video version of this, they shall be the McCloskeys going on this Doe series. And the background of this Doe series is I was in Rome, Italy, some time back, and there's some background of me that will become more pertinent as we go through with this conversation that I had with this individual that I'll be going through over posting this thing. Wow, I'm just no. Okay, with the Does. Get back to the Does. Get back on the ball. Okay, the Does. I was at a Thai restaurant in Rome with some friends of mine. One of them is like it was some party type of situation, and one of them in specific was somebody who was of Malawian ancestry. And small world, her parents somehow knew my parents from years back, working in international organizations, traveling around the world and things. And then I end up meeting her at this university because I was really good friends with her best friend at the time, and we end up going to this Thai place where you're sitting there with a lazy Susan. A lazy Susan is that kind of device in the middle of the table that spins around because it's like an all-you-can-eat Thai place. Well, anyway, so this person was having some wine, and he spilled some wine on my sketchbook because I carry my sketchbooks everywhere, and pretty much everywhere I always have something to draw with, and then there was some stain on it, and then I kind of outlined it. It looked like this kind of dough, and then I did this series of doughs, and then from then on I've been just creating these different doughs. Well, so that's the background story of how did this kind of character, this thing come to be for me to actually drawing this. That's a lot of stuff in there to actually come to why does Silas draw these doughs. But now I do these doughs and base it on different things and try to communicate different things out to it. The scene itself with the McCloskeys was this couple in St. Louis, Missouri? I think it's St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States of America. During the last couple of months, there's been a lot of social unrest, primarily following the George Floyd incident, which I've talked about that in separate locations. If you want to check that out, I might leave a link here on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're somewhere else, maybe I'll try to leave a link somewhere. But there was an incident where these people came into this supposed private area. They're supposed to have private security. It doesn't look like a sidewalk with this gate. And it's not your typical gated community, this massive gate. It was this kind of gate on a sidewalk that they broke that gate and entered, and then they were protesting. And then these people came out and they were like, get off our lawn. They were guns pointing, and people were like, oh, look at these white Republican hateful people. And then they're like trying to get these black people who are trying to save their lives, and there's all this harassment. These black people didn't do anything wrong. These Black Lives Matter Antifa people are just trying to be safe in this horrible country. And this whole thing exploded from that. People looked at them and assumed these are Republicans. And it was like, oh, no, they actually end up being people who donated to actual Democrats before. But then Donald Trump donated to Democrats before. So do they really care about those things? But it turns out he was also giving money to Donald Trump's campaign. But what does that actually show in the thing? Should someone be allowed to protect their actual land? Is that the legal aspect of the law? Like, what's going on? Is it how political are the things? Should these people have been in that place? Are you just allowed to just protest anywhere? Do protests have to be peaceful? No, they don't have to be peaceful. But if they're not peaceful, are they really a protest anymore? Does it come into like a riot? Does it come into something else? Should these people have actually assumed that these people are just going to walk through and just yell? And even walking through and yelling, should someone just be allowed to just come to your front yard and just yell and just jump the walls and do these things, enter the gates? Like, what goes on with these things? So how do people define this? Where does the actual discourse come into this? People look at this and say, it's because of Trump. These are the times that Trump actually created. But right now, some people are already calling this election for Joe Biden. the violence, the protests haven't stopped, and they won't stop. And there's just something that goes in, and I think by reading this conversation that I had with this person, this was November 4th, right after, tried to get some understanding of what do people think of who Trump is? What do people think of the legal process? What do people think of what's going to be going on? Do people think some of these things are just going to turn off like a switch? You know how they were mocking Trump and saying, "Oh, when you say the coronavirus is just going to disappear," I don't think he literally meant it's going to just disappear on the day after the election. But it seems like some think, and this is what I agree with Senator Kamala Harris on this one, when she was talking about the protests and these things are not going to stop. They're not going to let up before the election. They're not going to let up after the election, and they have continued. And these things will continue. When people were boarding up the stores, how many of you thought they were boarding up the stores because they thought Biden was going to win and Trump supporters were just right? And maybe some people do. Like that's the thing I don't understand. I'm going with more conversations where I actually have back and forth. And with some of these things, I already did one video I was talking about, went over and read a conversation I had with a friend about the Electoral College, tried to get some understanding. Problems occur not because of what X is, because of how we define X. So how are people defining the Electoral College? That was what that conversation was. How was I defining the conversations and the things that that person said in that conversation? And by reading through, I was like, okay, maybe I missed this. Maybe I should have said that in a different way. Maybe there was a misunderstanding here. And that's my attempt to do here. I'm trying to understand how is this individual, KO is going to be what I'm going to be calling the person here, is how are they defining Trump? What is their main issue with them? Do they think that, oh, if Trump isn't in, like I'm all of a sudden, all the reasons that I support Trump, with him getting people politically activated, with him questioning, making people question the media narrative and look and see, are we actually being told the truth about certain things? From him just letting people see that some people are very emotional on things that they claim to say are they more rational on. I think emotion has its place, but let's not use that as a substitute for rationality. Let's not use feelings as a substitute for actual solid evidence. And I also have a separate video talking about this. There's actually empirical evidence that people don't need empirical evidence to think that they have empirical evidence for what they actually say they believe or have evidence for. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. So with this one, I think I'll just try to read it through straight, and then I'll come back in and give some conversations and breakdowns. Because I think that way might give you out there who are listening, and thank you very much for listening, as fair of an actual idea of what I was saying. And with that speed drawing with McCloskey's, there's also merchandise. You can check that out. Wherever you listen to this, please like, please share, subscribe. That helps me out. That helps me know like I'm on point with some of the content that I'm making. And I appreciate you taking your time to listen. And you can also go to the merchandise store, and I just put these designs and things like that up. And I want to go with more things where it's like, okay, if I'm doing a certain video, I want to do specific art for that video, tie it in with a merchandise store, and just try to be more productive, try to be more interactive, try to communicate more, and have this be a more beneficial experience for all parties involved. So let me get into it now. Okay. So here is the main post that I had. It's going to be on the screen right now. This was November 4th, so this is the day after the election. And this is with an image I saw from CNN and Good Morning America, some stories they had on YouTube. And CNN said, Trump calls to halt vote counting prematurely. And then the Good Morning America ones, Trump calls for vote counting to end in battleground state. And this is the comment that I wrote with it. He did not call for vote counting to stop. Transcript and video below if you did not see it for yourself. And this is now quoting Trump. We won the states, and all of a sudden I said, what happened to the election? It's off? And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, it's a very sad moment, and we will win this. And as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it. End quote. He mentioned ballots being found to be added. He refers to why the election is off, if you want to refer to anything on actual counting. But since he did not literally say every vote should be counted, he totes wants to disenfranchise you. Sure. Now again, I might be able to improve on my communication, which is part of why I'm recording these videos. I go back in and read the things, and sometimes I'll be putting up these things and I'll think of some thought, then I'll go back and edit, and I won't like reread it. There's a reason there's editors and things like that in newspapers and books and things like that. Ideas come out better. And some of that might be part of the limitations that we had in this conversation going with. I'm going to read things as they were posted, and that might reduce the legibility of some of this, the literacy of some of this, and you'll see why I'm kind of pointing out the literacy of some of this, that might hamper some of it and that might stand, but I think it's still enough to understand what was being said as we go through this. And I said I will read through it once and then I'll come back in and give some commentary onto some things that might help. And then I just want to see, what do you see about this interaction, this conversation that I had with this person? Like an example from what I wrote here, I was talking about the disenfranchised because there was already some coverage at that time, the day after the election, already talking about Trump is trying to disenfranchise the black people, is trying to disenfranchise these people in this place because he doesn't want the vote count. But I was watching it live. You might have been watching it live too. And the states literally called it to stop. And then after that, there was some mixed news like, okay, let's not count the fake ones. And that's something that literally happened, yet already they're talking about Trump called for it to stop. And like, wait, no. The states themselves said they would stop. Now, people might go in and say the specifics. Oh, the states said they'd stop counting until the morning and things like that. Yet Trump is saying, let's stop counting completely. And it's just the confusion. Problems occurring because of how people are defining X and rather than what X actually is. On the night of the election, certain states literally stopped counting the vote, said they would stop counting the vote, at least at that time. And then Trump came out and said, what happened to the election? Why is it off? Why aren't they counting? That's something that literally happened. So that's kind of what I was focusing on primarily here. Like, look, no, that's what literally happened. Now you're covering it like he's the one who called the thing. Like, no, they actually stopped counting before. Yes, you can say, okay, they stopped counting for some time and then they were to resume the counting later. So that's a different situation. Then Trump is saying specifically, he's saying stop all the counting, but he's counting what? Okay, so let me just get into it and hopefully maybe you can see some of the things that I might have seen and we'll see what we see together as we go through this journey. Trump's illiteracy showed he was not intellectually fit to lead these last 4 years. White America, enjoy it while it lasts. In 2046, Hispanics will be the majority in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. This is my response to them. KO, you literally think he's illiterate or you think I'll just engage in hyperbole? Or is it hyperbole? How do you guys say it, that thing? Guys, gals, and everything else in between. Back to the reading. He can literally read. You and others did not think to call him illiterate or stupid until he ran and beat the supposedly most qualified candidate ever, who apparently can't defeat an illiterate person. It's trite and boring, especially seeing the mental faculties of, you ain't black if you don't vote for me, Biden. And on the topic of voting via skin/ethnicity, why do you assume any group behaves a certain way due to racial figures like that? Close to racism there. You are X, so you vote like Y. And here I left a link to my video, and if I'm here on YouTube or somewhere else, you might be able to actually get it, called You Vote Like a Black Woman, What Characteristics the Social-Political Demographics Share. And this is just a video talking about, if you're not actually going to watch it, if you haven't watched it yet, it's a video talking about how when you have a self-selecting group like women, people who happen to be women, happen to be black, but choose to vote, and they all vote in a certain way. 95% plus Democrat seems to be the common thing over the last couple of elections. Are there other things you can say about that group that you would expect them to act in a certain way? That was my general premise asking about this. Can you actually just count on that? Like, yeah, they're going to vote this way, and like, yeah, we're counting on at least 90% of them. So what else? If it comes down to like, oh, if there's going to be a movie in the movie theater, can we decide and say, okay, if somebody is a black female voter, 95% of them would probably choose to watch this movie. What else can we actually get from it? Which I think is it's something interesting that there might be some tests and things out there. Okay, back to the reading. This is KO's response. Donald Trump is politically illiterate. He voted early by mail in Florida, but wants mail-in ballots not to be counted because most of his white, bigoted, redneck supporters were going to cast their votes on Election Day. The two major reasons that he beat Clinton is because many Americans still think women should be subservient wives who cook, clean, and bear kids. Secondly, most poor and educated whites think foreigners, non-whites, have taken their jobs. They have absolutely no clue as to what is happening globally. You're laughing because some of this stuff seems kind of absurd to me. I mean, I'm going through this conversation because some background of my mental space and trying to understand these things, and right after the election, just being like, wow, this is some odd things are going on. Like the reaction to people, and it's continued to be odd all these almost 2 weeks after. Just seeing the reactions of people and some of the things people say and do and act. So anyway, I'll come back when I actually get into the actual, after I've done the reading, to come back and give some thoughts on some of these, because some of these things do get addressed somewhat as much as possible in the comments. Okay, so getting back into it. This is my response to them. KO, what percent of Americans think that? How many do you know? I think he, in the very least, knows as much about politics as the two of us. But I'm not illiterate. You can identify however you want. Why do you not hear about poor and educated Asians or blacks who supposedly didn't think foreigners willing to work for less have taken their entry-level jobs their demographics often had? Wonder how one finds out if these poor and educated Hispanics also know more about what you define as global affairs, or if it's a case of mainly being interested in their primary country of origin, rather than they would, on average, know more about what's happening in Japan. The only potential bigotry I have seen here is from you. Majority of them, or I may know a handful of whites that were bigoted. For sure, I've known blacks that were. And not just to whites, but to me as well. If you've met and associate with worse people than I do, have at it. But I don't judge groups from what less than 1% of them seem to do. You sling many insults. 99% of self-identified black female voters chose one way to vote. If I made other generalizations based on that, it would be racist this, self-hating that. I would rather not discuss characters and assumptions, but thanks for your comments anyway. And here we have CB, who came in with this comment. Wow, what a hateful pile of bullshit you just spewed. It must feel awful to be you. And then KO responded this way. CB, I just tell it like it is. And KO, what does that mean? Tell it like it is. Tell, like, what is? That's what I'm trying to understand. What do you think it is so far? What do you think she has said here that is? What is the is that I may have been missing? Okay, this is KO, and they're going to use a nickname here of me because my name is Robert Silas Samonga Nikuli. And going back into the past, some background here. They knew me when I was a lot younger. I lived in France, and I moved to Kenya, then I moved to the United States of America, then back to Italy, then to Kenya and the United States in different places. But they were somewhat older than me. I think they were maybe 15 years older than me at least. But Bobby was my nickname when they knew me, when we first met in person when I was like 5, related in some way, my mother's side of the family, but we haven't really interacted too much either here on Facebook where this post was and other situations, so this is some background on that. So, okay, so KO says this. For your information, Bobby, Asians, particularly those fleeing civil strife and persecution, are just glad to be in the USA. They work in chicken plants, sweatshops, restaurants, etc. Many of them came to this country without knowing any English, and even after being in the USA for many years, don't speak proper English. White Americans, on the other hand, used to earn good salaries being blue-collar workers, but when companies started taking jobs abroad, where labor is cheaper, then their standard of living changed, which led them to resent foreigners. Donald Trump, on the other hand, wants to build a wall to prevent Mexicans from coming to the USA, yet he employed them in his businesses, knowing full well that they were undocumented because of their cheap labor. He should have used the Homeland Security website to check whether they were authorized to work in the USA. Now, this is my response to that. This is a sort of political literacy you think Trump doesn't know of? Of the 5% of Asians in the USA that fit that specific group where the jobs were literally done by locals before? So yes, immigration, be it legal or illegal, does displace local jobs. It can, however, lead to other jobs being created and labor being freed to better uses. Now, why would these people flee homogeneous countries? To move to a racist America defeats me, especially since the companies are just taking those jobs abroad to the countries that they fled from. But the way some people, possibly you, define these accusations of bigotry you throw about is not something I agree with. It's a basic fact that cheaper labor will attract companies and increases the employment of those willing to work for less. It's why I support abolishing the minimum wage. It prices out people willing to work for less and possibly learn skills that can enable them to earn more in the future. This tends to have a disproportionate effect on certain races. I also support open borders as long as you do not use any of the services paid for via taxation in the location you move to, as it was in pre-1920 times. If you could move and earn a living, you did. I also would support only net taxpayers having a vote, as a primary purpose of the government is the redistribution of resources. If you are a net tax consumer, it stands to reason you would vote for more resources. I shall not address the character of the wall. Since I continue to be literal and you continue to assume that I know what you mean. Mexican isn't a race, it's a nationality. There are over 10 million Mexican citizens who legally moved to and live in the United States of America. They are more of Mexican ancestry. As for the ones that violate the migration laws and are thus illegally in the country, by definition criminals, sure majority of them doing that do it via the southern border. But Trump is likely as interested in preventing a Ghanaian or Syrian doing that as much as a Mexican. Even white Hispanics, if illegal, are not welcomed in. Mexico itself keeps a tight watch on much of the illegal migration on its southern border as well. And with this one, I posted a link to the video, Immigration Age of Integration. Would you support this, the years lived requirement for voting? And the general premise of this video, this idea, I'm doing a series on different things that are happening with voting. I do think there should be like a voting limit, but we'll talk about that. This is an age requirement. So this is, what does the age requirement do? What does it define? Why is it there? What is the purpose of it? I think the estimation is by the time someone is 18, they know enough about the society, the culture to value it, that they can make an educated decision on how to be a part of it, on what would be positive for that thing. Now, I think when somebody migrates in, there might be certain things they don't really understand about the country. There might be certain things they think made the country they left good that they want to be seen done in this country, but that ends up being the reasons they actually left those countries. And the inverse, there might be some things they actually hate in the country that they're in, yet they don't understand that, oh, I've been actually voting for this because I don't really understand how these systems work. So I was thinking you just have a system, because no one is really for universal suffrage. Most people, there might be some people out there, but most people don't walk around and just ask random people, let's just get these 10 people and then 5 out of 10, 5 plus 1, where 6 people vote on is what I'm going to have dinner, is who I'm going to marry, is who I'm going to work with, is how I'm going to actually get my salary, is how much money I have to give to somebody else. These are things that people understand, okay, this actually needs to be some requirement or some kind of issues of why somebody should be allowed to vote on a certain topic in a certain way. That's kind of what people do. So with this, I was thinking, keep that 18 thing. If you come in after your 18th year, you have as many years, another 18 years before you can vote, just like somebody who's born in that country. You have the 18 years until you're 36. So if you're 18, you can't vote until you're 36. But however many years you left on that 18-year requirement is halved after you turn 36. So for example, if you come in when you're 27, you have the 9 years until you're 36, and then at your 36th year, now it's halved. Whatever is left is halved. So since you have 9 years left, it cuts down to 4.5 years. Then you can vote. If you come in after 36, it's just 9 years. But you have that time to actually change. Your family's in there now, you're part of the society, part of the culture, and you're just more of an educated voter. And then I think that would be a better system. That's just a proposal that I have. Let me know what you think about that. Let me get back to the reading. KO says this. The boat people, Laotians, Vietnamese, Cambodians, fled their countries because of war, coups d'etats, massacres, etc. There is also the false narrative that America is the land of milk and honey until you get here. And this is my response to them. KO, are you still in the USA, or are you saying here as a matter of speech? As for illegal Asian migration to be going through to Europe, some in containers, and just here, a small little aside, let me add just for some explanation. I was remembering a news story of just seeing some people who were smuggled into Europe in some containers. And when you're talking about the boat people, I think that's why I was bringing this up, because the boat people is specifically in that illegal sense of escaping these certain places. When you're talking about people using boats, Asians using boats to illegally migrate, that's normally being done to Europe a lot more than to the United States of America, from my understanding, at least in the direct sense. Okay, back into this. So the boat people issue was more of a major thing within the Asian continent as well as it was decades ago. Another contemporary issue of contention that interests me more than the boat people and supposed sweatshops is or are the mostly Chinese practice of flying into the USA on the West Coast when almost due, giving birth to citizenship, then at times returning back to China and having the US government redistribute resources to them. Now, this is more problematic as the females migrate into the country on a valid legal visa. It's technically not illegal to have dozens in a few bedroom house with the intention of giving birth and then leaving. The system can be vastly improved for sure. However, even if this is at most 10,000 people a year, could that not be 10,000 multi-generational Americans of any clime that have been taxed for some time? If you want to conflate that with southern border migration, have at it, but I'm not following. Asians in general also earn more than whites, so they seem to be doing quite well as a whole in the oh-so-racist and white-biased country that they, for some reason unknown to me, still stay in and want to reach. If so racist, shouldn't you be glad Trump is reducing the non-whites that would come in and be persecuted? I've been looking into politics and econ with a primary focus in the USA somewhat actively for at least 5 years. In my estimation, I know more about it than the average American voter. I'm confident Trump knows as much in general, for sure more about certain specifics and need-to-know things. From experience, political conversations that begin with insulting Trump's intelligence tend to be futile for much else rather than reaffirming my past experiences. And here I posted a video just talking about the one nation indivisible from bigotry. Should Trump be cheered for destroying the USA? And this just goes to the thing. People say, oh, USA has always been racist, always been sexist. It's an inherently horrible country. It's garbage. Like, why are we making America great again? And then in the inverse, say, okay, well, Trump is destroying America. But if it's so bad, then shouldn't he destroy the bad thing? Shouldn't we cheer his destruction of it? And in this video, I also talk about the Roanoke thing. Roanoke was Roanoke Island, or there was an older colony, and this was about what does the country mean? What is the actual establishment of the country? What are the parts that made the country the country? And the way there was a confusion with this Roanoke Island, this myth about these Croatoans and this lost colony, wasn't really lost. They weren't really lost. They actually just moved because there was no actual access to actual food and maintaining the colony where they were. So they moved in and lived with the Roanoke, I think, natives at the time. And they kind of integrated into it. And I was going into this, asking the further questions, is if you're focusing on that and saying like, oh, it's the white ancestry or the ancestry of these people and these people from these places, you have these tribes and there's a chance like they intermarried. It might not have been the colonists themselves, but the kids of the colonists who were living with those tribes, they even look back in the place and say, oh, there's some blue eyes, there's some kind of blonde features, these different features in there. So if you talk about now in present year, are these people who are descendants of those actual colonists, are they part of the oppressor class? Or because they integrated with the native tribes, are they part of the constantly oppressed that needs reparations? So those are kind of the questions that I'm kind of asking with these dynamics. Okay, back to the reading. KO gave 2 responses to the first one. I left the US right years ago, and I have no regrets. Now here, I don't know if they're specifically saying the right, like the political right, or just they're saying the years. I think they actually left the country. This is the other response. I graduated with a degree in political science from the University of Georgia. This is my response to them. KO. You call someone that has been president of the United States of America for 4 years politically illiterate. Trump has a degree in economics from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. I guess that counters anyone questioning his economic acumen. I care very little if I'm talking to a homeless man in Kibera, which is a slum here in Kenya, that I think she would know about, but other people might know about. It's the world's biggest slum. It's about 1 million people in that place. And so, yeah, I'm just talking about this as an explanation. And I continue. Or the dean of Harvard. I still request evidence to back their claims unless they are just providing evidence for things like internal bigotry. Your possible credentialism scores you no points here. I get into semantics when I'm speaking of most topics, more so with things of this level of importance and inherent confusion. I get very literal. Some may consider it pedantic, but enough people agree with me on doing this, and I have found that to be preferable to being looser with language. Problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how I define X. It seems we aren't really using the language in a way that would work unless we had more time to take things point by point and check we agree on what words being used mean. KO responded to this. Knowing what we know about Trump, he probably bought this degree. And this is my response to that. There you go again with another ad hominem. In general, that's what universities ostensibly do. Someone applies, and if accepted, they pay for the education the school offers, after which you receive a degree. This credential is what some people, possibly you, bring up in conversations in lieu of evidence to back unsubstantiated claims. Now that's it for that initial thread. Before I get back into actually doing just a short review of some of my thoughts on the different things that were said in there, let me know what you think. What do you think? Do you think I was missing things? Do you see what I'm seeing here? I feel like we're passing across each other. Certain things are pointed out and a lot is said where I'm like, okay, I'm trying to address some of these points and going point by point and actually talking about the definitions of things, I think would have been important. But before I go back and do that, let me actually read a separate thread. This is now just a four exchange comment thread that they posted later on, and this seems to address more of the direct post. I don't know. Maybe when she's talking about illiteracy, she's saying like initially Trump said what he said because he was politically illiterate to actually understand is why he was talking about the things closing. I don't know. So here's the post that they said. This is KO on a different thread on that same post with the initial thing about the stopping of the elections. Bobby, there are no ballots to be found at 4 a.m. He's referring to mail-in ballots whose receipt dates are governed by state rules. Bobby, I didn't know that you are a Republican. Trump would only like you if you were a black man bringing him money. Remember Herschel Walker of the USFL's New Jersey Generals? And okay, I think maybe the commentaries because what is going on here? So first of all, I'm not a Republican. They responded a bit. Herschel Walker, this again, telling the date. Herschel Walker was a great. He went to University of Georgia. So I don't know if he was actually attending University of Georgia at the time when Herschel Walker was still there. He was just one of the Heismans and things like that. But USFL's New Jersey Generals. I mean, Herschel Walker also played in the NFL. He played in several teams in the NFL. So I don't know why she's going New Jersey General. Maybe she got to the USA at the time when he was in the New Jersey Generals and then he got traded into the actual NFL. I don't know, but this was kind of showing the age of the person and the University of Georgia alum. So they could be tied in, and maybe they're mentioning that because they also know that I played college football, so maybe I would have some connection to it. And Herschel Walker was one of the rather visual people campaigning for Donald J. Trump. Okay, back to my response to KO here. I am not a Republican, but you have shown yourself to be someone that would brand people things without evidence. You have not addressed questions I have asked, and have not retracted your insults. You continue to make assertions about Trump like you know him, and in this case, it's a negative to like people that earn you money? That's the primary reason people vote. What party or politician can take resources away from one group and redistribute it to you? I shall not engage in any more of your bigotry and caricatures. 10-minute video if you actually care enough to get my actual basis for sociopolitics, which is not Republican. Have several others indicating the main reasons I support Trump if you want to go beyond caricatures. And here I placed a link to my video on the non-aggression principle, also known as the zero aggression principle, and it's pretty much just saying zero aggression, non-aggression. And aggression is the initiation of force. It's not saying it's not pacifism. It's not saying you can never use force. If somebody punches you in the face and you punch them back, or if you put them in a chokehold, you hold them down, that is not the initiation of force. That is self-defense. So there's places like this. If you see your child walking around and they don't really see what's going on, they're reaching out and maybe there's like a hot stove or there's an iron or there's some electricity and you smack their hand down, that is a forceful action, but it's not abuse because you're directly trying to prevent them from harming themselves in a way that would hurt a lot more. But if somebody is just doing that and, you don't want them touching your cake and you do that same kind of action, that is an initiation of aggression. Yeah, you can say, they were trying to steal the cake for you, but come on now. So that's just something with this whole non-aggression principle. And if you want to check that out, I suggest you do check that out. So I did post that. And then KO came with his response. I will continue to argue with you. I have my beliefs and you have yours. This whole we'll agree to disagree type of thing. I miss me with that nonsense. But anyway, this is my response to them. Then I'm going to get back to just giving my review of the stuff from before. Okay, so KO, feel free to provide evidence. I'm not in some sort of heated exchange here, nor am I trying to convince you of anything. It's like you're just saying, pray to Zeus, and the droughts will end. I ask, why do you think Zeus can do that or assume that I want rain? Then you say, oh, so I didn't know you're a Hindu. It's of little worth engaging with your assumptions and borderline bigotry. I ask for evidence to back the things you claim you believe. You don't even acknowledge the questions. I present cogent info of what I actually do believe in and why, and I don't know if that even matters to you. This is more of a conversation, one of low utility as it's under a post indicating Trump didn't call for halting vote counting, but it's what 2 video titles said he did. Something you did not address in your first comment, but opened up with insults and then some racial culturalist gloating of sorts. So that was it. And if KO does listen to this, and I thank them for having this conversation, it really helps me learn some things, and I've been having some more over the time and might get into doing more of this content. I think the channel, my presentations will go more to actually having direct conversations where I record. I'm having one with my friend Steven, and he's the kind of person who was talking about with some of these exactitudes of some of these things. Maybe some people just don't actually want to talk about things in certain ways, and I'm just confusing. I'm just talking about things in the wrong way. Maybe I can do better. That one I do understand. And maybe the things that I'm missing. Maybe if I was actually sitting there talking to KO here, they'd be able to explain certain things. Maybe I need to make sure that before moving on to other topics, I make sure we understand the actual terms that are being mentioned to begin with. Let's actually talk about those things. I'd prefer creating some kind of platform like that. And I think, to me, that's one of the reasons I do support President Donald J. Trump, because I think him coming onto the actual scene did initiate people looking into things and questioning things a lot more. Why do I feel this way about this? Why does somebody claim this is going to be bad? If somebody says they fear this, why would they fear this? What are they talking about? Are we looking at the same things? Like, different things happen for the same reasons. The same person won, but different things are happening. The votes have actually come in. He literally said, why did they stop counting? Somebody sees that. He's telling them to stop counting. What happens there? What is the thing that's there? And that's not going to stop whether Trump is president or not. And that's what I'm thinking. Whether it's here in 2020 and Trump doesn't get in, or it was going to be 2024 at the end of his second term, I wasn't one of those, oh, he's actually going to stay in and be a dictator and have like 500 terms. That was completely troll things when he's talking about that. He was going to leave eventually. So if there's positive things I think the Trump effect has had, those things exist whether or not he's there. So what can I do to continue that? And that's having these conversations, trying to get more understanding, talking about certain topics. I'm not relying on Trump to have this understanding for me. I'm not relying on Trump to actually be the one talking to other people for me. If there's certain things I believe in, if I'm trying to understand other people, those are things I can directly do. So here we go. And it's part of the illiteracy thing. You know, Trump's illiteracy showed. What were they talking about with that initial illiteracy? Were they talking about general illiteracy or political illiteracy? I think I addressed both of them, but when people say this, they normally just mock him. And, oh, you can't read all this. But then when they talk about Biden having trouble with the with the teleprompters, oh, he has a stutter, how dare you make fun of him? So this is the kind of thing. Like, it seems to me a lot of the things, the characters, a lot of the hyperbole things, a lot of the ad homs that people had about actual Trump issues, about why they didn't like Trump. Old, white, like powerful, rich, male. Those are the things that Biden has. They don't really seem to care about where Joe Biden. So it's kind of like, what's going on in this thing? So they came out and they said politically illiterate is what they're talking about, and address that later more. But they're talking about here that he voted by mail, and now he's saying he wants mail-in ballots not to be counted because most of his white bigotedness goes into these insults. What? To bear kids? Like, wait, what? What kind of character is this? The Africans, the people in Kenya, not once subservient wives who cook, clean, and bear kids. That's more of a character of what African families are like. So why does he focus on, oh, these redneck supporters and things? The people, not everyone on the political left is Black Lives Matter was against the nuclear family. Some people actually like wives and kids. Don't they talk about how it's like, oh, we have these suburban women who voted for Democrats, like against Trump. They suburban women in general have kids. That's why they're in the suburbs mostly, I guess. But maybe because they don't cook and clean, they hire some of these supposed people that are talking about here are taking the jobs that they said earlier that the white people used to have a middle class or a good salary on, because now the migrants come in and they take those jobs and they're cleaning the houses of the suburban people. Like, that's one thing that I observed when I was living in the D.C. area, in the Maryland area, in Montgomery County, which is one of the wealthiest counties in the United States of America. Before I even got into politics, I was in high school and I was thinking, okay, some people, the Republicans are talking about, oh, we need illegal immigration out. But then I'm like, okay, but these people who I think might be illegal, or these recent migrants were mowing the lawns, they're being nannies, they use them as the workforce. So they're not really going to vote against it. Then you look at the Washington, D.C. area, you look at the voting patterns there, and it's kind of similar. It's kind of observations that I was having before I really understood what was going on, and it bears true. But when it comes to this situation, he's not saying all votes shouldn't be counted. He's talking about the legal vote. If you go through the legal process of not being in a certain location, because you have a job somewhere else and you can't move and things like that, then you're like, okay, then we're going to have mail-in votes. That's different than just sending out mail-in votes to people who don't even ask for them and go through the process, and then have situations where you have multiple times more people sending in votes, yet on the inverse, you have multiple times lower of an actual rejection note of the actual things that are considered valid votes. Then when you talk about the systems that people have, and that's the thing, why is it certain cities in certain states had issues, but other cities in those states or similar cities didn't have those similar issues? And that's the situation. It's, are they legal? Count all the legal votes is what you were saying in specific, not don't count any mail-in votes. Don't count illegal votes that were done in person. It's not just because of mail-in. It's just that the Democrats, even Barack Obama was shown in a video back in 2018, if this counts, if this matters to you, like I said, it shouldn't matter if it's a slum, if someone in the slum, if it shouldn't matter if someone in Harvard, as long as they're saying something practical, they have some evidence. Barack Obama was like, yeah, well, you have certain states, like in Oregon, you have certain states, I think he said in Oregon, it might have been Oregon, where he said they've already scanned all the signatures of all the people who can vote. So when people send in mail-in votes, they'll be able to double check those. But then now you have certain states where people don't even have to register to vote until the day of voting. What's going to happen in those situations? How are you going to double check who's voting in that? This system, do we have a system set up already enough to have these people send out all these ballots and come back in time and double check and make sure these people are actually on the rolls? Those are the issues that actually were coming up with this, and they're still coming up and will go to the actual Supreme Court of the United States of America. By the time you listen to this might already be settled and we might already know what's going to happen with that. One last thing they said here in this comment was like, no clue about the things they understand globally. I'm like, who knows about things globally? And if you are in the supposed best country in the world, whether you agree with that milk and honey type of thing that they were talking about, but with them, with the milk and honey thing, first of all, who's telling that milk and honey thing? Yes, United States of America is marketing itself. But when you have places like the Mexican government, I think they have actual things, documents saying, move to the United States of America, and when you get to the United States of America, some parastatal involved type of things are saying, once you get there, this is how you apply for social services, this is how you do this. So they're already indicating that, look, this place has certain things. And when you actually look at it, there's a lot more people migrating to the United States of America than the inverse. Now, are these people dumb? Was she dumb? Was she out of place when she decided to move there earlier on and then go to the University of Georgia? Does she regret that? Does she think that was all a lie? Why are people falling for this lie constantly? Why can't we just tell people? And maybe that's what they feel is being done by telling people how garbage the United States of America is. Maybe people will stop. But again, if people are supposed to stop going there because it's so garbage, then shouldn't we cheer Trump for preventing people from going there? What's going on? There's some inconsistencies that I don't really understand with some of these thinking and some of these things that are being said. Now, with the next response, they go to this caricature of Asians. They talk about immigration, and Asians, I think, however you want to define Asians, if you want to throw the Indians in there too, Pakistanis, Afghanis, and there's a certain line there where it changes. Throw them with the Koreans, with the Chinese, with the Japanese, with the Filipinos. I think at most 5% of the country's population. So to focus on maybe at most 1 million people when you're talking about illegal migrants, even if you're talking about the actual legal migrants a year coming from certain of these places, it pales in comparison compared to the southern border, and that's from the issue. And I don't know how often Trump actually brings up the thing. Maybe when you're talking about, the H-1B, but H-1B is like skilled laborers. So when you talk about here, they talk about chicken plants and sweatshops. That's a different one where they have the seasonal workers. But even when they do that seasonal workers, a lot of those are people coming in from the southern border, people coming in from Central America and Southern America. It's not, you're not really shipping in people to work in sweatshops in the United States of America. There's really not that many of them. Part of why, as they mentioned here, part of why the companies are moving businesses abroad is because you can have sweatshops in China, you can have sweatshops in India, but you can't really run a sweatshop in the United States of America, at least for long. But maybe she might also be Americanized in some state, and her definition of what a sweatshop is might be different than what in general I might be thinking about here. But they seem to have a visceral dislike for white Americans here, and I don't know the kind of white Americans they know. I don't know how many Asians they know. The Asians I know are at least first generational, I think, some multi-generational ones, and most of them work in some white collar type of jobs. they're not working in sweatshops and chicken plants. But again, she might know different people than I know. Talking about the Donald Trump, if they actually, like you see, when they make a statement here, oh, Donald Trump knew they were undocumented. If you know that, if he knew that, that's illegal. He can get thrown in jail for that. So why would you say he knows something? Because they just say things to say things. Like, do they literally think Trump knew and that's why he hired them? If they think that's true, why didn't somebody prove that and put him in jail for it? Now, if they're just being figurative, what else are they just being figurative about? Do they actually mean anything they say? And that's why it's just kind of annoying to have certain conversations about people like this with these kind of things. Now, I started mentioning some things here about my standpoint on some of these things. Not wanting a minimum wage and things like that. Wanting open borders. Giving actual evidence, putting videos where I've talked about things more. I don't expect them to actually watch the videos, but I try to actually detail some of my ideas. And that's when it comes to later on, it's like, oh, I didn't know you were Republican. It's like, what have I said that makes you think Republican? There might be a few things. Oh, just because I like Trump, I'm Republican? Because I'm not for the minimum wage, even though I explained to you, like, it's not, my issues with the minimum wage is it outprices certain people that actually learn things. In general, these groups that she supposedly says are being disadvantaged, it's not just white workers who get displaced by these things. Literally, if I moved to the United States of America and took a job at a Fortune 500 company and was earning me $150,000, I was contributing to the part of the society, I was being part of it, I was giving to charity, doing all these things, at that point, chances are there is still at least one other human being in the world living in the United States of America that could have taken that same job, that could have actually filled and applied for that same job and done a decent enough job similar to me. Now, if it's a job that involves writing something or drawing something or something creative, there might be certain things about me in particular that other person would not be able to do, or that person would be able to, that I would not be able to do, that you can say, okay, this is why we're specifically taking this person. But when you talk about something basic, like a chicken plant or a sweatshop, which I guess is working on clothes, sewing things, restaurants where somebody takes your order and then you go and you tell the cook and the person brings the food back. These are basic things that many people can do these things in pretty much the same way. So whether that person has traveled in from Guatemala and then gone across the border in one of those caravans and then eventually been naturalized and gets that job, they take that job away from somebody who maybe was a student trying to pay their way through school, who could have done that same job because it doesn't really take that many skills. Now that person is like, okay, I'm going to rely more on the student aid because I don't really have the access to have these kind of jobs here. So I'm going to do that, and then that's tax money coming out, that's in debt in them. So these things do have an effect. Even if it's legal, if it's illegal, there's a literal fact, and there's going to be some resentment that's going to happen in there. And my resentment, as I mentioned here, is not necessarily towards the people, the foreigners who are doing it, because they're trying to improve their lives. They realize that the countries that they're in are not as good as the United States of America, which is why they move and are willing to work at those low wages, because those low wages are still a lot higher than anything they could possibly get in their country. And whichever kind of anger and strife and things that you think they might be feeling, these words, and not being appreciated, not being represented on Hollywood movies, they don't care, because when they were living in Guatemala, when they were living in Cambodia, those places, they didn't care about Hollywood movies. They didn't care about the lack of representation because they couldn't just put food on their table. But now they're in the United States of America. Sure, they have to watch white people on Friends and not see like Juan be one of the friends in the things, or oh, it's only the soup Nazi and Seinfeld or something. How come we don't have this Armenian family that's very successful? Oh, it's not the Kardashians. No, so all those kind of things, they don't care about that. What they care about is they might be getting that $500 a week, but that's enough for them to actually live in the United States of America and send money back home to the relatives and family that they care about in the country they're from and support them and then try to get them over. They have other things to care about that this horrible country, the United States of America under Donald J. Trump, still gave them in some sort of way. But then I think these are things that Donald Trump would be well aware of. People around to say this is why somebody's politically illiterate is just nonsensical to me. Then to finish off here, I indicate, as I've discussed, part of why these last couple of weeks have been interesting to me, because right after I was like, okay, what's going on here? Then I started looking at the coverage, started hearing the way people were talking about the political sphere again. From having 4 years of people being just 4 to 5 years of just very strong antagonism towards Donald J. Trump, pointing out every small thing that they might consider to be negative, pointing that out, ignoring all the actual policy things that he's doing, actual things that he's doing, being a part of these Middle East deals, peace deals. Being in a situation where I think there was only one outright foreign religious tied it's not religious tied, because I'd say something like the shooting of the senators and things by the Bernie Sanders supporter, that person has a religious aspect to his politics. But there was that one terror incident in New York City, I think in 2018 or 2017, where somebody ran over and killed, I think 8 people, ran over more people, injured more people. But then there hasn't been any other theological or outright religious violence of terrorism in that sense under Donald J. Trump, despite his supposed Muslim ban and making it so bad and there's going to be all this retribution. People were doing decently economically in whatever way that you say. Under Obama, he was helping people do this. Under Bush, he was helping people do this. Under Clinton, he was helping people do this. In that same sense, you can say under Trump, people were doing well until this pandemic happened. That's a global situation. So is it just the pandemic? What's going on? What are the actual figures? What are the actual things and the policies that you can say? How many people has he actually? He hasn't initiated any military things. We were talking about how America is this colonial imperialist power going out. He's trying to get troops back home. You have people against that. It's a strange situation with Trump. It's a strange kind of this Trump derangement syndrome thing. It's been very odd to me. But these weeks after seeing how the media covers politics and realizing how bland and how much obfuscation, they seem to just be going back to, oh, let's just unity, everything's okay. Oh, look, he's putting Trump supporters. Let's unite. Some people are saying this. Oh, we're not going to cover these gaffes. The little coverage, the cover that they were giving for Biden as he was running, those are the things that had me so apathetic about politics. Like, there's no point to engage people. People don't really care about this. There's no point. These people are just the thing that gave me the most. The thing that I hung my hat on, as they say, that I was like, okay, yes, this is a garbage situation, but at least they're bureaucrats and the system is so bad that they really can't be that harmful. And I'm still kind of on that point. But one thing is the inverse. I'm not apathetic anymore about discussing people, engaging people, and talking about this, because I think people are still going to be engaged. People aren't just going to go back. Enough people are not going to be able to just go back to politics as usual, to media coverage as usual. These people pulled out all the stops. They did a lot of things in order to get to this position, and people won't forget. People are still going to be engaged. I'm still going to be engaged in engaging people. Not just about politics, but this whole idea that saying, oh, this is not political. I think somebody was literally, like, the Biden administration is not going to be political. What? No. And maybe that's what I wasn't getting. That their objections to Trump were not political. But I'm like, wait, he's a political agent. It's politics. How are you going to say it's not political? When he's saying, oh, we're going to put transgender people, we're going to put gay people, that is political. Like, politics should be political. I know people say politics poisons things, or we need to get things out of this. I am different on this one. I think politics is involved in life. Whether you care about it or not, it's involved in your life. It's going to affect your life. So we might as well have more knowledge about what we're actually in. But if there's one field that's okay to be political, it should be politics, right? So I'm going to wind that down here. The McCloskeys have been on the screen, the Does. Somebody actually bought one. I was like, yes, somebody bought one. So I need to do a better job of advertising on these stuff. If you want to help me out monetarily, there's also a link to PayPal below. One-time donations can be given there. I'm working on getting things set up to streamline some of these processes and make this be more viable for me to go forward and communicate in more practical and effective ways, because I think it's important. And I think some of you, especially if you've listened to this entire thing, thank you again. You probably consider some of this important. And I want to create a platform where some of the conversations you have, some of the conversations I have, some of the conversations other people are having can be actually shared, and we can exchange information and learn, instead of having these gatekeepers of information. Instead of saying, let's rely on Trump, let's rely on Biden, let's rely on X politician, let's rely on Y party, let's rely on Z policy in order to fix the world for us. Let's find ways to do it within ourselves, get better control. Another design I just thought of, and two designs, was Sanctuary Citizen, where you're a citizen within yourself. The same way there's a sanctuary city where it says, okay, that might be the law outside there, but we don't agree with the justice of that law. We don't think that's ethical. We don't agree that's moral. We're not going to enforce that in here. Have your own situation where you are a citizen within yourself. You're embodying your body. Your mind is in charge of your body, and you have the monopoly of the laws over your body in that situation. Still adhere to the non-aggression principle, where you don't go out and impose on other people. Once you start dealing with other people, there's certain agreements that you're going to have, such social contracts you're going to have in order to have those agreements and have those dealings. But if it's within yourself, you are somebody within yourself. Be the sanctuary within yourself. The other one was My Own President. Instead of just being like, oh, no, that's not my president, or Barack Obama was my president, or now Biden's my president. I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to vote against that president. Be your own president. Be the person who can actually preside over your own affairs. Don't rely on some other person doing it, because there is going to be a time when that person who's in there is not going to be the person that you support or you wanted to be in there. But when it comes down to it, that person is your president if you actually are a citizen in that country on the whole legal sense of it. So there's the legalities, there's the practicalities, there's having these conversations and trying to get some understanding. I'm not feeling like I'm anti-KO here. I don't think KO really understands who I am. She seems to be making certain assumptions, and maybe if they listen to this, thank you for listening. Again, thank you for those comments for having, because I think having that has taught me some things and has also been the basis, the content for creating this video and having it out here. But yeah, that's how people end things, right? By just gibberish and things like that. So that gibberish at the end might have made as much sense to her, to that person, or maybe to you out there, as my entire reading of this thing, but I'm trying to get to a point where it makes more sense, so I'm not just wasting my time talking, and we can have an improvement for a better world, for more human flourishing, as we continue to exist here on Spaceship Terra, or is it Earth? Whatever. Till next time, goodbye.